In the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada, where the glimmer of neon lights meets the tranquility of suburban neighborhoods, lived a man named Jake. With his scruffy beard and a penchant for quirky t-shirts, he epitomized laid-back living. By day, Jake was a graphic designer, crafting eye-catching visuals for local businesses. By night, he was an avid online shopper, exploring the depths of e-commerce for everything from rare vinyl records to the latest tech gadgets. However, Jake's life wasn't without its complications. He resided in a community governed by an iron-fisted homeowners association, HOA, a group notorious for its stringent rules and regulations. The HOA ensured that lawns were mowed to perfection and that no one dared to display holiday decorations outside of the designated time frame. Among this cadre of rule enforcers was Karen, a woman whose obsession with order could rival that of a drill sergeant. Infamous for her thick glasses and an insatiable hunger for control, she patrolled the neighborhood as if it were her personal fiefdom. Jake often found himself at odds with her over minor infractions, a potted plant that was slightly off-center or a fence that had seen better days. Yet despite these skirmishes, he maintained a sense of humor about the absurdities surrounding him. The way Jake saw it, life was too short to be consumed by petty disputes over lawn ornaments. It was on an otherwise typical Tuesday afternoon when things took a turn for the worse. Having eagerly awaited his latest Amazon delivery, a limited edition board game he planned to debut at his next game night, Jake felt a rush of excitement as he checked his front porch. But instead of finding his prized package waiting for him, he discovered nothing but an empty space where it should have been. Panic set in when he spotted Karen walking away from his door, cradling what appeared to be an identical box under her arm. It didn't take long to connect the dots. She had stolen his package. The audacity left him stunned and enraged. How could someone so obsessed with rules blatantly disregard personal property? Frustration bubbled within him as visions of potential revenge flickered through his mind. As Jake paced around his living room, contemplating how to address this betrayal without descending into chaos himself, he couldn't shake the feeling that this situation called for something unconventional, a response that would make Karen think twice before pulling such stunts again. He chuckled at the image in his mind, not just any retaliation but one that would combine creativity with shock value. Little did he know that this moment would mark the beginning of an outrageous scheme involving angry hornets, an idea inspired by both frustration and an irrepressible desire to reclaim his sense of justice in a neighborhood ruled by fearsome HOA bylaws. That Tuesday afternoon had started like any other. Sunlight streamed through Jake's living room window, casting cheerful patterns on the floor as he eagerly awaited his much-anticipated Amazon delivery. The limited edition board game had been an obsession of his for weeks, and he could almost taste the victory of finally owning it. He had cleared his schedule for game night, envisioning laughter and friendly competition with friends while immersed in a world of strategy and chance. As he paced by the front door, the familiar sound of a delivery truck rumbled down his street. His heart raced with excitement as he hurried to the window, anticipating the moment when the driver would drop off his prize. But instead of seeing a delivery person carefully placing a box on his porch, Jake noticed something far more unsettling. Karen was standing by his front door. Dressed in her signature beige cardigan and armed with an air of authority, she inspected his porch with hawk-like scrutiny. Jake squinted, trying to make sense of what was happening. Just then, Karen bent down to lift a package that clearly belonged to him, the very one he had been waiting for, and cradled it in her arms like a trophy before striding away with an unsettling confidence. "Wait! What are you doing?" Jake shouted, rushing to open the door. Panic surged through him as he realized that she had just stolen his package right before his eyes. "Did you order that hideous board game?" "It's against HOA policy to have such tacky decor," she called back over her shoulder without breaking stride, dismissing him with a wave of her hand as if he'd merely asked about her gardening tips. Unbelievable. He could hardly process her justification, which felt absurd in light of the blatant theft he was witnessing. The audacity left him reeling. Was this really happening? As she marched off toward her own home at the end of the block, laughter erupted from several neighbors who had gathered by their fences to witness this spectacle unfolding. The humiliation boiled inside him like a pot on high heat, each neighbor's snicker echoing loudly in his mind. How could someone so fixated on enforcing rules blatantly ignore basic human decency? Jake turned back into his house, shaking with frustration at both the situation and himself for feeling powerless. This theft didn't just cross a line, it shattered it into pieces scattered all around him. He knew he had to act, but how? As he paced around like a caged animal in his living room, ideas began bubbling up through the haze of anger. He would not let this go unaddressed. If Karen thought she could treat him like nothing more than an inconvenience in her quest for control, she had another thing coming. Little did he know that a particularly outrageous response was forming at that very moment, one that would certainly shake up their picture-perfect neighborhood in ways no one expected. As Jake sank into the worn-out armchair in his living room, the weight of the day's events pressed heavily on his chest. The laughter of his neighbors still echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of how quickly camaraderie could turn to ridicule. It wasn't just a package that had been stolen, it was a violation of trust and respect that gnawed at him like an unwanted parasite. He scanned his living room, which now felt like a cage rather than the comfortable haven it once was. Every item seemed to mock him: the half-finished board game set up on the coffee table, the untouched snacks he had prepared for game night, even the brightly colored delivery notice still propped against the wall. They were all reminders of his thwarted plans and growing resentment toward Karen's overreach. Frustration rolled through him like a storm as he recalled her dismissive wave, the way she strolled away with his package as if it were her rightful claim. How dare she? How dare this self-proclaimed arbiter of community standards invade his life so brazenly? The thought alone sent shivers of anger through him. Each minute that passed only compounded his feeling of helplessness. What could he really do against someone who wielded HOA rules like a weapon? Jake had always perceived himself as a laid-back individual who avoided conflict whenever possible, preferring humor over hostility. But for the first time in years, he felt cornered by an irrational strictness that was strangling not just him but others in the neighborhood as well. The frustration morphed into a profound helplessness. He had always valued personal property and community spirit, yet here he was, feeling utterly powerless in this twisted social game. He thought about how easily Karen dismissed her actions, invoking HOA policies without regard for their humanity or personal connections. She operated under the guise of keeping order while disregarding basic decency. It was infuriating. Was he really going to let her get away with this? Would anyone stand up for him or even care? As waves of emotion ebbed and flowed, Jake realized this experience had changed him. He could no longer ignore Karen's antics or accept them as mere quirks of an overly regimented life. The pent-up anger began to crystallize into clarity. If he did nothing, he would become just another target in her relentless pursuit of control. But how to respond? It needed to be something unforgettable, something that would capture both his outrage and creativity while making Karen think twice about crossing him again. He clutched at ideas forming within him, determined to reclaim not just the stolen package but also his sense of dignity in this increasingly ludicrous fight against the tyranny of an unyielding HOA. Sitting in his armchair, a wave of inspiration washed over Jake like a sudden gust of wind, lifting the heavy fog of frustration that had clouded his mind. As he mulled over the absurdity of his situation, a grin began to form on his face. What if he turned this grim scenario into an opportunity for outrageous, playful revenge? After all, he was a graphic designer, a creative thinker by nature. Perhaps humor could be his weapon in this battle against Karen's tyranny. With renewed energy, he jumped up and grabbed a notepad from the coffee table. He started jotting down ideas, allowing his imagination to run wild. Drawing on the ridiculousness of the entire situation, Jake envisioned a scheme that would not only amuse him but also send a clear message to Karen. If she thought it was acceptable to invade his space and steal from him, maybe she needed to experience a taste of her own medicine. His thoughts drifted to the idea of Hornets, angry Hornets, to be precise. The more he contemplated it, the more it made sense. They were unpredictable and chaotic, much like Karen's approach to community rules. What if he replaced the stolen package with a box full of these buzzing intruders? The very notion sparked uncontrollable laughter within him as he imagined Karen's startled face when she opened the door to find her trophy teeming with angry insects. Jake couldn't help but picture himself as some sort of mischievous cartoon character plotting the ultimate prank. It was absurd but deliciously satisfying to think about how this act could disrupt Karen's meticulously controlled life for once. He scribbled down blueprints for his plan: how to acquire the Hornets safely, what kind of box would work best for transport, and even ideas on how to ensure maximum surprise upon delivery. As he sketched out potential scenarios, Jake realized that this plan was more than just petty revenge, it was also an assertion of his independence from Karen's overreach. He wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences and that he wouldn't simply accept being pushed around anymore. The blend of humor and creativity began to fuel him with courage. He felt empowered as each idea took shape. With every detail hashed out on paper, the logistics and timing, Jake's initial feelings of humiliation transformed into excitement. This wouldn't be merely about reclaiming a lost package, it would be about standing up against someone who had taken advantage of their community by wielding authority like a sword. It was time for some real fun in this increasingly ludicrous battle against the HOA's iron grip on their lives. Suddenly invigorated by this newfound purpose, Jake set about preparing for what would undoubtedly become an unforgettable showdown with Karen, one that would leave its mark in their neighborhood long after the Hornets buzzed away. With his plan taking shape, Jake plunged into research mode with a determination that rivaled the intensity of any graphic design project. Screens filled with tabs dedicated to Hornets, their habitats, and safe handling tactics quickly cluttered his laptop as he sought to acquire his unconventional prop. Hours turned into a whirlwind of information on local insect farms, video tutorials on beekeeping techniques, and even online forums where enthusiasts eagerly shared insights about live insects. He quickly discovered that while acquiring hornets was not an everyday chore for the average citizen, it provided plenty of comedic moments. One video tutorial featured a man confidently addressing the camera while holding a jar full of hornets. "They do sting, but don't worry. Just keep your hands steady," he remarked cheerfully. The thought of Jake attempting any of this sent him into fits of laughter, picturing himself fumbling with the jarring reality of these angry creatures buzzing around him like miniature helicopters. Next, Jake scoured local listings for insect suppliers. He found one with intriguing reviews that touted not only safety measures but also their premium service and hornet handling classes. He chuckled at the idea that one might graduate from a class on safely transporting angry hornets as if it were some noble profession. He hesitated and then decided he would at least call for more information. Dialing the number felt nerve-wracking in a way he couldn't have anticipated. When a chirpy voice answered, Jake stammered through an explanation that would either end in hilarity or disaster. Hi. I'm looking to procure some hornets, for personal reasons." There was a long pause on the other end before the voice erupted into laughter. "Did you say hornets? Not something you hear every day." After explaining his peculiar situation and getting distant advice on practicality, and plenty of warnings, the lady directed him toward an area that specialized in delivering hornets for pest control rather than pranks. Post-call, he shook his head at the sheer absurdity. Who would have thought he'd be accidentally enlisting services to rid someone's garden of pesky pests? Jake's next step was figuring out transportation logistics. A quick search led him to elaborate designs for boxes specifically meant for maintaining live insects during travel. He stumbled upon DIY tutorials featuring everything from ventilation holes to minimalist escape-proof latches. The sight of these amateur setups had him chuckling. "If I don't craft this box just right," he joked with himself, "I could unleash a full-scale airborne revolt." With newfound zest interlaced with absurd hits of humor derived from each misadventure in online wormholes of research, Jake crafted blueprints in bold strokes, drawing not just box outlines but diagrams adorned with comical doodles displaying marly and vibrant descriptions capturing what an excited Karen might encounter. Warning: open box contents might cause indoor chaos. This blend of frustration and humor spurred him on as he acquired everything necessary, from crafting supplies to actual hornets gathered from surprisingly accommodating, and slightly bewildered, local shops, solidifying his scheme into something tangible that brought exhilaration along with the rising stakes. It felt good. It breathed life into his meticulous plans for retaliating against Karen's tyranny, and reminded him to approach this ruckus with just enough levity to make it enjoyable. The day had arrived for Jake to execute his audacious plan, and excitement coursed through him like a shot of adrenaline. Armed with carefully crafted blueprints and a box that he had meticulously designed to transport the hornets, he felt like an artist preparing for their grand reveal. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange hue over the neighborhood as he prepped for what would be the ultimate act of revenge against Karen. Jake's first task was to collect the hornets. He approached the local supplier with a mix of trepidation and anticipation. The box he had prepared, complete with ventilation holes and a handle with care label, clutched tightly in his hands. After a brief exchange filled with bemusement from the staff, they handed him a small container filled with furious buzzing creatures that would soon become his unexpected allies. With the hornets secured, Jake carefully transported them back to his home, doing his best to remain calm and collected despite the occasional sharp buzz near his ear that made him jump. Once inside, he set up an assembly line in his living room. He placed the small container into his handmade box, ensuring it was snug but not too tight, a balance between security and freedom for his new buzzing friends. Next came timing. Jake glanced at the clock. It was nearing late afternoon, prime time when Karen often strolled around her yard inspecting for any violations. This was his moment to strike. He grabbed a pair of gloves and donned protective eyewear before sealing the box securely but stealthily. This had to look innocuous enough that she wouldn't suspect anything until it was too late. With all preparations finalized, Jake stepped outside and positioned himself strategically behind a nearby hedge, heart racing as he waited for Karen's predictable routine to unfold. His neighbors were blissfully unaware of the chaos about to ensue. They merely saw a man lurking with what appeared to be an ordinary delivery box. As expected, Karen emerged from her house moments later, clipboard in hand as she surveyed her domain like a self-appointed queen inspecting her kingdom. Spotting the package on Jake's porch, where he had left it just minutes earlier, she approached with her usual air of authority, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "Let's see what you've ordered this time," she muttered under her breath as she reached down to grab the box. Jake stifled a nervous laugh while trying not to make any noise that would give him away. The instant Karen lifted the lid of the box, chaos erupted. Hornets swarmed out in an angry cloud. They buzzed around her head like tiny helicopters on a mission. The surprised look on Karen's face transformed from one of curiosity to sheer panic within seconds as she flailed her arms wildly, emitting yelps of terror that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Jake couldn't help but break into laughter from his hiding spot, watching as she darted away from the porch while neighbors emerged from their homes to witness the commotion unfolding before them. They stared in disbelief at Karen's frantic escape while Jake felt an exhilarating rush of satisfaction mixed with relief. The execution had gone off without a hitch. In that surreal moment of chaos mingling with laughter, Jake knew he'd made his point. No one would challenge him or intrude upon his space without facing hilarious consequences. As he reveled in this newfound sense of freedom from HOA oppression, it seemed like nothing could overshadow this glorious victory against tyranny wrapped up in comic absurdity. The moment Karen opened the box, the chaos erupted like a scene from a slapstick comedy. Hornets poured out in a furious cloud, buzzing angrily and creating a cacophony of sound that echoed through the otherwise quiet neighborhood. Surprised residents emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock as they witnessed the spectacle unfolding before them. "Karen! What's happening?" shouted Mr. Thompson from across the street, his voice laced with disbelief. He stood there, arms crossed, eyebrows raised high, watching as Karen flailed her arms wildly in an attempt to ward off the swarm. Her face, once painted with authority as she surveyed her neighborhood, was now twisted in panic, her clipboard dropping to the ground as she backed away from the porch. "Get them off! Get them off me!" Karen shrieked, darting around in circles while trying to swat at the angry hornets now circling her head like a menacing halo. The sight was both hilarious and alarming. It felt like something straight out of a cartoon. Neighbors began to chuckle and whisper amongst themselves, tension dissolving into amusement as they witnessed the unraveling of Karen's carefully crafted facade. Jake, still hidden behind the hedge, couldn't contain his laughter. He watched as Karen stumbled backward into her freshly manicured flower bed, sending dirt and petals flying into the air. It was clear she had underestimated Jake's resolve and creativity, and he felt an exhilarating thrill watching her chaotic retreat. The neighborhood buzzed, literally and figuratively, with excitement as more onlookers gathered. Some stood with their hands over their mouths in disbelief while others pulled out their phones to capture video footage of the unexpected drama. "This is going to go viral," someone exclaimed, and a collective chuckle rippled through the crowd. As Karen continued her frantic dance, even some of her staunch HOA allies couldn't help but join in the laughter. Mrs. Jenkins, who usually sided with Karen on every community issue, was openly snickering while shaking her head in disbelief. "You think you can run a neighborhood without consequences?" she quipped sarcastically, raising her phone to get a better angle of Karen's plight. Realizing she was losing control of the situation, both with the Hornets and in front of her neighbors, Karen finally made a break for it. She sprinted toward her house with all the grace of a startled gazelle, fumbling awkwardly over fallen branches and garden tools left in her way. The Hornets seemed to be on a mission of their own, following close behind in hot pursuit. Maybe take it easy on the rules next time, shouted another neighbor amid laughter as Karen reached her front door and slammed it shut behind her. The collective relief and joy among residents were palpable. For once, they felt united against the tyranny of Karen's oppressive rule. Jake peeked out from his hiding spot just long enough to see his neighbors enjoying what could only be described as sweet poetic justice. As laughter filled the air and tension evaporated like morning dew under the sun, he savored this moment of triumph, a victory not just for himself but for everyone who had ever felt stifled under Karen's watchful eye. With that victory came newfound camaraderie among neighbors who had long been fearful or silent under HOA scrutiny. In an unexpected twist, Jake had not only pulled off his outrageous prank but also sparked a sense of empowerment within his community that might just change things for good. In the days following the Hornet incident, the atmosphere in Jake's neighborhood shifted dramatically. What had once been a place filled with whispered grievances and tension under Karen's reign of strict rules transformed into a lively hub of shared laughter and camaraderie. Neighbors who had long kept their heads down began engaging in conversations previously deemed too risky, partly fueled by the excitement of having witnessed Karen's dramatic upheaval. Yet amid the revelry, Jake found himself reflecting on the aftermath of his audacious revenge. Was this truly satisfying, or had he unleashed a ripple effect that could lead to unforeseen consequences? While the initial thrill of watching Karen flee had brought him immense joy, he couldn't help but ponder the potential fallout from his actions. The following weekend, a community meeting was organized, ostensibly to address the fallout from the Hornets but also to discuss broader issues within the HOA. Jake felt a knot of anxiety clench in his stomach as he prepared to attend, knowing that the spotlight was now on him as both a participant in the prank and a voice for change. As he walked into the meeting hall, he noticed groups of neighbors chatting excitedly about the event and sharing their own humorous takes on what had transpired. As discussions unfolded, it became evident that opinions were divided. Some residents applauded Jake for standing up to the HOA's overreach and inspiring them to take back their community, while others expressed concern over his methods. Mrs. Jenkins, who had initially laughed alongside everyone else, stood up and raised her hand. While we all got a kick out of Karen's meltdown, she noted sternly, we must ask ourselves if this is how we want to handle disputes moving forward. Her words hung heavily in the air, sparking murmurs of agreement from some attendees who feared that Jake's retaliation might inspire more chaos rather than foster constructive dialogue. After all, what kind of neighborhood would they become if pranks replaced open communication? Jake listened intently, realizing that while his plan had temporarily disrupted Karen's authority, it also highlighted an underlying issue: how their community had become polarized around fear and control rather than unity and respect. He wondered if his act of revenge would ultimately lead to a more significant rift or spark genuine collaboration among neighbors seeking to curb Karen's influence. By the end of the meeting, Jake took a deep breath and decided to speak up. He shared his experiences of feeling powerless against the HOA and how creating laughter from chaos felt liberating at first. However, he acknowledged that they needed more than just laughter; they required a united front built on mutual respect and open communication. As he concluded his thoughts, a wave of applause surged through the room. It seemed that while his prank had initially been about personal satisfaction, it had also ignited discussions that could lead toward meaningful change if approached thoughtfully. In that moment, Jake realized that revenge might not always yield lasting satisfaction but could serve as a catalyst for deeper conversations and potential resolutions within their community. He stepped away from the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps it was time to channel this momentum into something constructive, fostering both humor and healing as they navigated their way forward together. In the weeks following the Hornet incident, the dynamics of the community began to shift in ways that Jake hadn't anticipated. Initially, the laughter and camaraderie sparked by Karen's chaotic escape seemed to create an unspoken bond among neighbors. Many who had previously felt marginalized or intimidated by her strict adherence to HOA regulations found their voices again, emboldened by the shared experience of humor and unexpected rebellion. However, the initial support was soon tempered by a growing awareness of the potential repercussions. During casual conversations at local parks and coffee shops, murmurs of concern began to emerge regarding how the HOA might respond. What if they decide to tighten their grip even more, wondered one neighbor as they sipped their coffee, eyes darting around as if expecting a HOA representative to appear at any moment. Others echoed this sentiment, recalling past instances when the HOA had retaliated against those they deemed troublemakers. At a neighborhood barbecue organized to celebrate their newfound camaraderie, discussions turned serious as residents debated the implications of Jake's actions. While some applauded him for daring to stand up to Karen, others expressed unease about setting a precedent for future confrontations. "We can't just resort to pranks every time we disagree," cautioned Mrs. Jenkins, who had once sided with Karen but now found herself torn between wanting change and fearing chaos. Jake sat quietly amidst the chatter, feeling a mix of pride and guilt. He hadn't intended to ignite division, his aim was merely to reclaim his dignity and poke fun at the oppressive atmosphere created by Karen's authoritarian presence. Yet, it became clear that his prank had opened a Pandora's box of issues that couldn't easily be resolved with laughter. As the days passed, he noticed certain neighbors growing more cautious, watching their lawns and decorations as if expecting an HOA inspector at any moment. Conversations that had once flowed freely were now laced with uncertainty, as people hesitated to express opinions that could provoke scrutiny from the HOA. The fear that had once gripped them under Karen's rule seemed to resurface, albeit in a different form. Now it was fear of backlash from both the HOA and their fellow residents. Feeling a sense of responsibility for the unintended consequence of his prank, Jake decided to take action. He organized a follow-up meeting for residents not only to address their concerns but also to brainstorm ways they could collectively advocate for a more balanced approach to community governance. "What if we propose some new guidelines or committees? It might help us regain some control over our own neighborhood," he suggested, hoping to channel the energy from his prank into constructive dialogue. The meeting attracted a diverse group of attendees, all eager to discuss how they could take back their community without resorting to chaos or revenge. Through this initiative, Jake hoped to foster an environment where residents felt empowered to voice their concerns openly and collaboratively, one that embraced humor but also prioritized respect and communication. In this way, the Hornet incident served not only as a catalyst for change but also as a reminder that community dynamics are fragile. While laughter can unite, open dialogue and mutual understanding are essential for lasting harmony. As Jake looked around at his neighbors engaged in spirited discussion, he felt hopeful that they could navigate this new chapter together, transforming their community into one defined by cooperation rather than fear. As the weeks rolled on, Jake found himself reflecting deeply on his journey, from the initial humiliation of losing his package to orchestrating a wildly unconventional prank that unexpectedly brought his neighbors closer together. He had initially sought revenge as a means of reclaiming his dignity, but what he discovered along the way was far more significant than mere retribution. It was a profound transformation within himself and within his community. Jake had entered this saga feeling isolated and powerless, but he emerged with a new understanding of conflict resolution. His prank had sparked conversations that none of them had dared to initiate before, conversations about autonomy, respect, and the balance between authority and community spirit. Each neighbor who spoke up not only shared their grievances but also contributed to ideas for moving forward in a more constructive manner, taking back their neighborhood from fear and intimidation. At one of the recent community meetings, Jake couldn't help but notice how different the atmosphere felt. The laughter shared over Karen's misadventure served as an icebreaker, allowing everyone to express deeper concerns without hesitation. As Jake observed laughter replacing whispers and camaraderie blossoming where fear once thrived, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him. His heart swelled with pride when he saw neighbors advocating for change. People who had once kept silent now expressed their opinions boldly. Jake's personal growth shone through during these discussions. No longer did he feel like an outsider fighting against tyranny. Instead, he took on the role of a mediator, encouraging open dialogue among residents and using humor as a tool to navigate sensitive topics. It became clear that while laughter maintains camaraderie, honest communication reinforces bonds even further. Through all these experiences, Jake learned that addressing conflicts through creative expressions can yield positive outcomes but must be coupled with genuine efforts toward understanding one another. The lessons learned from bringing Hornets as shock therapy for confrontation had opened Pandora's box, not just for chaos, but for reinvigoration of community spirit. In terms of balancing authority within the HOA structure, residents began formulating proposals for new bylaws aimed at ensuring fair treatment and representation. With Jake leading initiatives alongside his neighbors, they envisioned committees that could foster healthy communication between community members and HOA representatives. As summer settled over Las Vegas, Jake often found himself laughing with neighbors, sharing stories that ranged from mundane daily life to the ridiculous escapades they'd survived together. The Hornet incident became a treasured memory rather than a source of anxiety or division. In closing this chapter of his life, Jake understood that while seeking revenge might have been thrilling in the moment, it was in fostering relationships filled with humor and mutual respect that true peace resided. As he stood amid friends in their revitalized neighborhood park one evening, bright lights twinkling against the desert sky, he felt grateful for every twist and turn along this unexpected path to restoration and growth. Together, they created an environment where joy replaced fear, not just surviving as individuals under HOA rules but thriving as a vibrant community united by resilience and laughter.